Welcome from Lansing to the Lakeshore. Good to see you all again today. And today we have with us a guest, Noah Hall, who is not only a friend of mine and a friend of yours, although you may not know it yet. He's a good, strong friend of the Great Lakes. And Noah is here with us today to talk with us about a lot of different Great Lakes issues. In fact, there are going to be two shows with Noah that you'll be able to see, this one and one that will follow. Noah is someone who's worked with us in the legislature in the past. Then he went on to become a professor, but we won't hold that against him because he's still helping us and working with us on a lot of issues. So I'm going to let Noah tell you a little bit about his background and what he's doing now.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Senator, and it's really a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be involved in yet another way to work on Great Lakes issues with you. You've been a champion on the issues from the moment you arrived at the legislature.
Thank you.
Let's see. Well, I'm a recovering attorney, essentially. After practicing law for many years and doing quite a bit of legislative work, both with a private law firm as well as with not-for-profit environmental groups, I went into law teaching about 4 or 5 years ago. Primarily work on environmental and water law, some international environmental issues as well. And recently we've started a Great Lakes Environmental Law Center to both better educate people about Great Lakes law and the importance of Great Lakes legal reform, as well as to bring some litigation occasionally when that's needed in order to get people to do the right thing, and to give law students an opportunity to get involved in the lawmaking process and in legislation, since in many ways, environmental problems, whether it's specific to the Great Lakes or in general, are really going to be there for the next generation to solve. And so we're trying to build that foundation now.
Well, good. And I do want to mention that you did work for the National Wildlife Federation.
Yes.
Actually, when we first met.
Yeah, I was the Great Lakes Water Resource Manager for the National Wildlife Federation, which is an excellent organization. Many of your viewers might know it as the people that deliver them Ranger Rick magazine.
Yes.
Your Big Backyard for your kids. My kids love those magazines.
They're great. In fact, I can recommend them. My sons, when they were growing up, always subscribed to Ranger Rick.
Oh,
they made sure Ranger Rick was on our coffee table.
Yeah, they absolutely love it. It's, you know, it's pictures of birds and animals that they often see in their backyard.
Yes.
It really helps bring nature, I think, to kids.
It does.
National Wildlife Federation also does a lot of really important policy, advocacy, legal work, and they've had a strong presence in the Great Lakes for over 20 years and have been one of the real advocates for Great Lakes protection. And
a strong commitment to the Great Lakes Compact.
Yes.
and to making sure that it's passed. So that's what we're going to talk about with this show, Noah. First of all, tell me a little bit about your involvement with the Compact and how you got to where you are with the Compact.
Sure. Well, the Great Lakes Compact, for folks who aren't aware of it or haven't seen the headlines in the newspapers, is this regional agreement between the 8 Great Lakes states, from Minnesota to New York, certainly including Michigan right at the center, as well as the 2 Canadian provinces. And this was a long-term effort to ensure that the Great Lakes are protected against both diversions as well as to improve how we use the water within the Great Lakes Basin. We're concerned that water is becoming more and more precious and more scarce, and there's water crises all around the country, and the threat of a Great Lakes diversion is becoming more and more imminent. Fortunately, going back, 7, 8 years now, the Great Lakes governors recognized this, and they began a process through the Great Lakes Charter to develop a new binding legal tool to protect the Great Lakes from diversions. I was involved in the process from fairly early on. The Council of Great Lakes Governors appointed me to their Water Management Working Group, essentially an advisory role to the governors. I was there on behalf of the National Wildlife Federation, representing other environmental and conservation groups as well. Although we found pretty quickly that there really weren't disagreements between environmental groups and business groups the way you have on many other issues. Really, the challenge was crafting an agreement that meet the needs for each of the different states, all of which have very different positions regarding the Great Lakes, very different interests, very different concerns. And so I was one of the few attorneys involved in the process. So, and I ended up playing a fairly significant role in negotiating and drafting what became the Great Lakes Compact. The governor signed it about 3 years ago, and that's really just a ceremonial signing. Then the real work began.
The hard work.
The hard work that the legislatures have to do. For the compact to become law, it needs to be passed by each of the 8 legislatures, both houses in each of the 8 Great Lakes state legislatures, as well as approved by Congress. And that has been quite a bit of work, as you know well.
As I know. Can you update us on which states have passed it and adopted it, and where it is in the states that haven't passed it, and then we'll talk about Michigan.
Sure. Minnesota was the first state to pass it early last year. Illinois followed, and then Indiana and New York have also passed it quite recently. So that's 4 of the 8 states. Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois, New York. The 4 that remain then are Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Wisconsin looked to be the state that maybe there would be the most trouble, the greatest difficulty in passing the compact. And that's because there are a lot of fast-growing communities, suburban communities in Wisconsin, that are near Lake Michigan, but outside of the Great Lakes watershed. And the Great Lakes Compact bans most diversions of water out of the watershed. It does provide some exceptions for those communities that are right near the watershed line. So basically communities that think of themselves as a Lake Michigan community that are just a short drive from Lake Michigan, the compact creates some exceptions for them to be able to get Great Lakes water. Finally, it looked like the compact was not going to pass in Wisconsin just 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then finally a deal broke, and after the legislature left and the session ended, and they thought their work was done for the summer, but a deal was arranged, and the governor called the legislature back for a special session, and perhaps by the time people are watching the show, the Wisconsin legislature will have become the 5th state to pass the Great Lakes Compact. Pennsylvania, I expect to pass it pretty shortly as well. There aren't really many major issues in Pennsylvania. In Ohio, there's a major controversy involving property rights and how the compact treats groundwater, which is treated legally different from surface water. We could just discuss that more. And then, of course, that brings us to Michigan.
In Michigan. And in Michigan now, the compact is on the floor of the Senate and on the floor of the House. 2 different versions, but very few differences between the versions that are on the floor of the House and the Senate. So basically, the compact legislation is poised to go, but we also have it tie-barred to the water withdrawal assessment tool, which we've actually had Dr. Paul Seelbach and John Bartholic on the show earlier, but it's been several months ago, so I know viewers will want to hear a little bit more about it. And I'd like to update them as to the importance of tie-barring and why it's tie-barred. First of all, tie-barring is when you put 2 pieces of legislation or more than 1 piece of legislation, and you say, if one passes, the other must pass for number 1 to become effective, and vice versa. And the reason that we did that, I did that with my legislation, and Representative Warren has done the same with her legislation in the House, was because we feel it is so important that they go together. The compact does call for each state to adopt water withdrawal laws, comprehensive water withdrawal laws if they don't already have them, and Michigan does not have them. And we have something that's very new and actually groundbreaking, scientifically groundbreaking, that we want to do in Michigan that we've been working on for several years. And I want you to talk a little bit about the water withdrawal assessment tool, because I know you know about it too, and then I'll chime in also.